The roar of the crowd thundered through the massive arena on Xanthe, a cacophony of alien voices unified in bloodthirsty excitement. Sweat poured down Damon Reed's bare torso as he circled his opponent, a hulking four-armed Vrexian with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with murderous intent. "You fight well for a soft-skinned human," the alien growled, its mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among its kind. "But this is where your journey ends." Damon didn't waste breath on a reply. 3 weeks of fighting through the Tournament of Genetic Excellence had taught him to conserve energy. Instead, he feinted left, then ducked under a massive swing that would have separated his head from his shoulders. The Vrexian stumbled forward off balance for just a fraction of a second, all the opening Damon needed. He drove his fist into the creature's unprotected thorax, feeling something crack beneath his knuckles. The alien howled, but Damon was already moving, executing a perfect leg sweep that sent his opponent crashing to the arena floor. Before the Vrexian could recover, Damon had the ceremonial blade at its throat. "Yield," he commanded, pressing just hard enough to draw a trickle of luminescent, purple blood. The arena fell silent. No human had ever reached the finals of the tournament, let alone stood poised to win. The Vrexian's eyes flashed with hatred, then dimmed in resignation. "I yield to the human," it rasped. The crowd erupted. Damon stepped back, chest heaving as tournament officials rushed forward to declare him champion. His vision swam with exhaustion as he raised his arms in victory. He'd done it, survived the impossible gauntlet that had claimed the lives of dozens of competitors. What Damon didn't know, as he basked in his triumph, was that his real challenge was just beginning. Later, cleaned up and dressed in the ceremonial victor's robes, Damon was escorted to the royal reception hall. The massive chamber glittered with strange crystalline formations that cast prismatic light across the gathered alien dignitaries. "The champion approaches," announced a tall, thin alien with translucent skin. "Damon Reed of Earth, victor of the Tournament of Genetic Excellence." Damon strode forward, trying to project confidence despite his exhaustion. At the far end of the hall, seated upon an elevated throne, was the most striking alien he'd ever seen. Empress Variel of the Xylanthian Empire was almost human in appearance if humans had skin the color of burnished copper and eyes like frozen sapphires. Her silvery hair cascaded down her shoulders in elaborate braids interwoven with precious metals. She studied Damon with clinical interest, as one might examine a particularly interesting specimen in a laboratory. "Approach, human champion," she commanded, her voice melodic yet cold. Damon climbed the steps to her throne and bowed as he'd been instructed. "Your Majesty." "You have surprised us all," Variel said, rising from her throne. She circled him slowly, her long fingers occasionally brushing against his arm or shoulder. "No human has ever displayed such genetic potential." There was something in her tone that made Damon uneasy, but he maintained his composure. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'm honored to represent Earth in your tournament." Yes, she said dismissively. "But more importantly, you have proven yourself worthy of a rare honor." She snapped her fingers, and an attendant rushed forward with an ornate scroll. "The reproductive contract." Damon blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, the what?" Variel's perfect lips curved into what might have been a smile on a human face. On hers, it looked predatory. "Only the most exceptional genetic specimens are offered this opportunity," she explained as if speaking to a child. "You will provide genetic material for the royal bloodline. Your DNA will strengthen our species. It is the highest honor we can bestow upon a tournament champion." Damon stared at the contract, then at the alien Empress. Her beauty was undeniable, but there was no warmth in those icy eyes, only calculation. "And exactly what would this contract entail?" he asked carefully. "You will reside in the palace breeding quarters," Variel said, gesturing to the document. "Your needs will be met. You will provide samples on a regular schedule. The royal geneticists will handle the rest." "Samples," Damon repeated flatly. "And my role beyond that?" Variel looked genuinely puzzled. There is no beyond that. Your genetic material is what interests us, human. You yourself are merely the vessel. The realization hit Damon like a punch to the gut. He wasn't being offered a position of honor. He was being collected like a prized stud animal. But surrounded by alien guards in the heart of the Xylanthian palace, he saw no immediate way out. With a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, Damon accepted the scroll. "I'm flattered, Your Majesty," he lied. The breeding quarters turned out to be a luxurious prison. Damon paced the perimeter of his suite for the 100th time, cataloging every detail. Plush furnishings in alien designs, exotic foods delivered 3 times daily, entertainment systems loaded with content from across the galaxy. All the comforts a prize specimen could want. Everything except freedom. 2 weeks had passed since the tournament. 2 weeks of being poked, prodded, and scanned by Xylanthian scientists with their cold hands and colder eyes. 2 weeks of providing samples in sterile rooms, while medical technicians waited impatiently outside. Damon stopped at the viewport that dominated one wall of his quarters. Beyond the transparent barrier lay the sprawling capital city of Xylanthi, its spires reaching toward twin moons that hung like mismatched eyes in the purple sky. Somewhere out there was a spaceport, and beyond that, the stars, and Earth. A soft chime announced a visitor. Damon turned as the door slid open to reveal Empress Variale, flanked by 2 guards with plasma rifles. This was her 3rd visit since his installation in the breeding quarters. "Your Majesty," Damon said, offering a bow that was just shallow enough to border on disrespect. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Variale dismissed her guards with a flick of her wrist. They hesitated. No one was supposed to be alone with the dangerous human, but ultimately backed out, the door sealing behind them. "The preliminary genetic analysis is complete," she announced, gliding into the room like liquid mercury. "Your DNA contains several unexpected markers of interest." "Glad to hear I'm such a fascinating lab rat," Damon replied, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. Variel's head tilted slightly. "You are displeased with your accommodations? They are the finest in the palace." "The accommodations are fine. It's the bars on the cage I object to." "Bars?" She looked genuinely confused. "There are no bars." Damon laughed without humor. "It's a figure of speech, Your Majesty. I'm a prisoner here. You signed the reproductive contract willingly, under duress, surrounded by armed guards, with no explanation of what it actually entailed." Damon took a step toward her. "Where I come from, that's not considered willing." Variel's icy eyes narrowed. "You should be honored. Your genetic material will strengthen the royal bloodline for generations. Few non-Xylanthians are deemed worthy of such a privilege." "Privilege?" Damon spat the word. "You treat me like a prized bull, harvesting my genetic material without a shred of respect for my autonomy or dignity." "Your human sensibilities are irrelevant," Variel said coldly. "The contract is binding." Damon crossed to a small table where the ornate scroll lay. He'd spent days studying it, looking for loopholes, weaknesses, finding none, but that hadn't deterred him. "You know what I think of your contract?" He snatched up the scroll, locked eyes with the Empress, and with deliberate slowness tore it in half, then quarters, then eighths, letting the pieces flutter to the floor between them. Variel's face transformed from cold arrogance to shock, then to a fury so intense it seemed to radiate heat. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. "No one has ever—" "That's your problem right there," Damon interrupted. "No one has ever stood up to you. No one has ever told you that people, human or otherwise, aren't just collections of useful genes to be harvested at your convenience." The Empress's hand flew to a communication device at her wrist. "Guards, seize the human." The door slid open, instantly, and 4 armed guards rushed in, weapons trained on Damon. "Take him to containment," Variel ordered, her voice trembling with rage. "The contract is voided, but he will still serve a purpose. Prepare him for the experimental procedures." As the guards surrounded him, Damon maintained eye contact with the Empress. "You can take my DNA," he said quietly. "But you'll never understand what makes humans truly special. It's not in our genes. It's in our spirit. Something you clearly lack. The last thing Damon saw before a stun baton connected with his temple was Variel's face, her perfect features contorted with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. Rage, certainly, but mixed with something else, something that almost looked like doubt. When Damon regained consciousness, he was strapped to a cold metal table in a sterile laboratory. Gone were the luxurious accommodations of the breeding quarters. His new cell was a bare-bones detention unit with a single cot and sanitation facilities. A thin, severe-looking Zylanthian male in a white coat approached, studying a holographic display that hovered above a wrist device. "The Empress has reclassified you," he informed Damon without preamble. "You are now Subject 173H, designated for experimental genetic extraction. The process is less comfortable than the voluntary donations you were previously providing." "Less comfortable?" Damon repeated dryly. "How diplomatic of you." The scientist ignored his sarcasm. "We begin tomorrow. I suggest you rest while you can." As the scientist departed, Damon tested his restraints. They were solid, but not unbreakable. He'd been in worse situations during his military career back on Earth. The tournament had been his ticket off a planet that had little use for decorated soldiers after the peace accords. Now he had a new mission: escape this nightmare and find a way home. But not before showing Empress Variel exactly what human spirit was capable of. The experimental procedure was everything the scientist had implied and worse. Damon lay panting on the laboratory table, his body slick with sweat as the extraction device finally powered down. The Zylanthian technicians moved around him with clinical detachment, cataloging samples and making notes on their holographic interfaces. "Subject shows remarkable resilience," noted the lead scientist, Dr. Javin. "Most specimens require sedation by the third extraction point." "I'm not a specimen," Damon growled through gritted teeth, "and you can stick your sedation where the sun doesn't shine." Dr. Javin merely raised an eyebrow, or what passed for one on his angular face. Continued verbalization during extreme discomfort. Fascinating. As the technicians filed out, Damon tested his restraints again. 3 days of captivity had given him ample opportunity to study the laboratory's routines and security measures. The restraints were bio-locked to the technicians, but he'd noticed a pattern in their activation sequences. The door slid open unexpectedly, revealing not another technician but a young Zylanthian male in formal palace attire. He glanced nervously over his shoulder before approaching Damon. "You are the human who defied the Empress," he whispered. Damon eyed him suspiciously. "That's one way of putting it. My name is Navos. I serve on the Empress's advisory council." The Zylanthian's voice was barely audible. "There is something you should know. The tournament, your selection, it was not random." "What do you mean?" Navos glanced at the door again. "Empress Variel has been obsessed with human genetics for years. Your species' adaptability, your resilience. She believes these traits could save our people." "Save you from what?" Damon asked. "Extinction." Navos's icy eyes, similar to Variel's but warmer somehow, were grave. "Our birth rates have been declining for generations. Genetic degradation from too much selective breeding. The royal line is the worst affected." Damon processed this information. "So I was targeted specifically? Your military record, your survival skills, your genetic profile, all were factors in bringing you to Zylanthi. The tournament was merely a public justification. Why are you telling me this?" Navos hesitated. "Because not everyone agrees with the Empress's methods. There are those of us who believe cooperation, not exploitation, is the answer." A distant alarm began to wail. Navos stiffened. "I must go. But know this. Events are in motion that will change everything. Be ready." He pressed something into Damon's palm, a small metallic disc, before hurrying from the room. Damon closed, his fist around the object, concealing it just as Dr. Javin rushed back in, his face tense. "Secure the specimen," he barked to the guards who followed him. "The palace is under attack." The laboratory erupted into activity. Through the confusion, Damon examined the disc in his hand. It appeared to be a security override, similar to those worn by the lab technicians. His ticket to freedom if he could time it right. The facility shook with a distant explosion. The lights flickered, then stabilized. Rebel faction, one guard informed Dr. Javin. They've breached the East Wing. Evacuate the priority specimens, Javin ordered. This one included. As they began to unlock his restraints to transfer him, Damon made his move. He slapped the override disc against the control panel of his restraint table. The system sparked, and all the restraints released simultaneously. Before the stunned guards could react, Damon was in motion. Years of combat training took over as he disarmed the nearest guard and used him as a shield against the others. A few well-placed strikes later, and all 3 guards plus Dr. Javin were unconscious on the laboratory floor. Damon quickly stripped a guard of his uniform and weapon. The fit was strange on his human frame, but it would have to do. He was about to leave when a new alarm sounded, this one more urgent than the last. "Attention all personnel," came an automated voice over the facility's communication system. "Code, Crimson. Royal Protection Protocol engaged. Empress Variel's life has been compromised. All loyal forces converge on the throne room immediately." Damon hesitated at the doorway. He could make for the spaceport now, escape while the palace was in chaos. It was the logical choice. But something Navos had said nagged at him. Events in motion. The Empress's life threatened. Was this part of the plan he'd hinted at? "Damn it," Damon muttered, checking the charge on his stolen weapon. Against all better judgment, he turned away from freedom and headed deeper into the palace toward the throne room. The corridors were in chaos. Palace staff fled in all directions while security forces moved against the flow, weapons drawn. Using the confusion as cover, Damon made his way through the palace, following emergency signage toward the royal chambers. As he approached the throne room, the sounds of combat grew louder. A massive explosion rocked the corridor, throwing Damon against a wall. When the smoke cleared, he saw the ornate doors to the throne room had been breached. Inside, a scene of carnage greeted him. Royal guards lay dead or wounded across the polished floor. At the far end, Empress Variel was cornered on her throne dais, defending herself with surprising skill, using a ceremonial energy staff. But she was outnumbered by a group of armed Xylanthians in distinctive gray uniforms. "Thank you for your service, Your Majesty," announced their leader, a tall Xylanthian with a scarred face. "But your experiments with alien DNA end today, along with your reign." Damon recognized the insignia on their uniforms from palace security briefings. The Purists, an extremist faction opposed to any genetic contamination of Xylanthian bloodlines. They'd rather see their species die out than adapt with foreign DNA. As the leader raised his weapon for the killing shot, Damon made a split-second decision that would change everything. He fired his stolen weapon, hitting the Purist leader in the shoulder and sending his shot wide. All eyes turned to Damon as he stepped into the throne room. "Sorry to crash the party," he said, moving to place himself between the Empress and her would-be assassins. "But I've got a bone to pick with Her Majesty, and I can't do that if she's dead." "The human!" spat the Purist leader, blood seeping from his shoulder wound. "This abomination is exactly why our pure bloodline must be preserved." Damon kept his stolen weapon trained on the group of extremists. "I'm not a fan of Her Majesty either, but killing her won't solve your genetic problems." "Stand aside, creature," another Purist demanded. "This is an Xylanthian matter." "Make me," Damon replied with a dangerous smile. The Purists charged as one. Damon fired twice more, dropping 2 attackers before they were upon him. He switched to hand-to-hand combat, using the fighting techniques that had won him the tournament. Despite being outnumbered, his superior training gave him an edge. Behind him, Empress Variel had recovered her composure and was wielding her energy staff with lethal precision. Together, they formed a surprisingly effective fighting unit, Damon creating openings that Variel exploited with swift, deadly strikes. When the last Purist fell, Damon and Variel stood back to back, both breathing heavily. The throne room was silent except for the distant sounds of fighting elsewhere in the palace. "Why did you intervene?" Variel demanded, not lowering her staff. "You could have escaped during the chaos." Damon turned to face her. "Good question. Maybe I'm just not the kind of man who runs away when there's a fight to be finished. Or perhaps you saw an opportunity to bargain for your freedom, she suggested coldly. There is that, he admitted with a wry smile. But mostly I wanted to see the look on your face when a mere genetic specimen saved your royal hide. Before Variel could respond, the palace communication system crackled to life. "Attention all loyal subjects," came Navos's familiar voice. "The palace has been compromised. The purist faction has seized control of the security systems and communications hub. They are executing all non-pure bloods and royal loyalists. This is not a drill. Implement emergency protocol Exodus immediately." Variel's eyes widened. "Exodus protocol? They're trying to force me into the open." "What's Exodus?" Damon asked, checking the charge on his weapon. "Emergency evacuation procedure. All royal personnel are to converge at the spaceport." She looked at Damon with newfound calculation. "The purists will have that area heavily guarded. We need another way out." Damon moved to the throne and examined the dais. Palaces this old usually have secret passages, emergency exits for the monarch. Variel hesitated, clearly reluctant to share such information with a prisoner who had every reason to hate her. But another explosion, closer this time, made the decision for her. "Behind the throne," she admitted, "there's a network of tunnels that lead to various points throughout the capital, including a private royal hangar." Damon nodded. "Lead the way, Your Majesty." Variel activated a hidden mechanism, and a section of the wall behind the throne slid open. They entered just as another group of purists breached the throne room. The passage was narrow and dimly lit by bioluminescent strips along the floor. They moved quickly, Variel in the lead, navigating the labyrinthine tunnels with practiced ease. "These tunnels date back centuries," she explained as they descended a spiral staircase. "Built during the succession wars, when assassination attempts were common." "Some things never change," Damon remarked dryly. They continued in tense silence until they reached a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions. "The left passage leads to the city center," Variel said. "The right to the royal hangar. The center continues deeper beneath the palace to an emergency bunker." Damon considered their options. "The hangar is our best bet if we can secure a ship." A distant rumble interrupted him, followed by the sound of falling debris. "They're bombing the palace," Variel realized, her voice tight with anger. "These fanatics would destroy centuries of history to kill me." "They're desperate," Damon said. "Your genetic program threatens their entire worldview." Variel shot him a sharp look. "How do you know about the program's details?" "I had an informative chat with your counselor Navos before all hell broke loose." Damon met her gaze steadily. "He told me your species is facing extinction due to genetic degradation. That's why you're so interested in human DNA." Variel's expression hardened. "Navos had no right to tell me why I was kidnapped, experimented on and treated like a prize stallion," Damon interrupted. "I think I had a right to know." Another explosion, closer this time, sent dust raining down from the ceiling. "We can debate ethics later," Damon said. "Right now we need to move." They took the right passage toward the hangar. As they hurried through the increasingly unstable tunnel, Variel spoke again, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Why? Did you really save me? After what I did to you?" Damon didn't slow his pace. "Where I come from, we don't leave people to die, even people who've wronged us, especially when there are bigger issues at stake than personal grudges." "Your species is confounding," Variel admitted. "We get that a lot," Damon replied with a hint of a smile. They emerged from the tunnel into a small private hangar housing several sleek spacecraft. Damon whistled appreciatively. "Nice collection. I'm guessing that one's yours?" He pointed to the largest vessel, emblazoned with royal insignia. "The Royal Starbird," Variel confirmed. "But it requires a full crew to operate." "Then we'll take that one." Damon indicated a smaller, more streamlined craft. "Looks like a 2-person scout ship. Easier to slip past whatever blockade the purists have established." As they approached the vessel, the hangar doors suddenly began to open. Damon pulled Variel behind a fuel container as a squadron of purist soldiers entered, Weapons ready. Check every ship, ordered their commander. The Empress will try to escape this way. Damon assessed their situation. 6 armed purists against the 2 of them, with minimal cover in the open hangar. I count 6, he whispered to Variel. Too many to take head-on. The scout ship has a remote activation sequence, Variel whispered back. If I can access the hangar control panel, I can create a diversion. Damon nodded. I'll cover you. While the purists began methodically searching the larger vessels, Variel slipped along the wall toward the control panel. Damon provided cover, moving between cargo containers to draw attention away from her. When Variel reached the panel, she entered a rapid sequence of commands. Suddenly, the Royal Starbird's engines roared to life, its lights flashing in an emergency startup sequence. The purists immediately converged on the royal vessel, momentarily forgetting their search pattern. Now, Damon hissed. They sprinted for the scout ship. Damon laid down covering fire as Variel activated the entry ramp. They tumbled inside just as the purists realized their mistake and opened fire on the smaller vessel. Can you fly this thing? Damon asked as they rushed to the cockpit. Of course, Variel replied, sliding into the pilot seat with practiced ease. Her fingers danced across the controls, and the ship hummed to life. Strap in. The scout ship lifted off as plasma bolts peppered its hull. Variel executed a tight turn and accelerated toward the still open hangar doors. They shot out into the purple Zilanthian sky, the palace, now partially in ruins, shrinking behind them. They'll send pursuit craft, Variel said grimly, eyes fixed on the navigation console. Where are we headed? Damon asked, scanning the unfamiliar controls for weapon systems. Variel hesitated. There's a research outpost in the northern mountains, loyal scientists working on alternative solutions to our genetic crisis. Alternative to kidnapping aliens, you mean? Variel's knuckles whitened on the controls. As they soared over the capital city, Damon saw the extent of the uprising. Plumes of smoke rose from government buildings in the central plaza. Crowds had gathered, some fighting, others fleeing. Your people are tearing themselves apart, he observed. This conflict has been brewing for generations, Variel replied, her voice tight. The purists believe any genetic modification or introduction of foreign DNA is sacrilege. They would rather see our species die out pure than survive through adaptation. And what do you believe? Damon asked. Variel was silent for a long moment. I believe in survival, she finally said. But perhaps I have been too single-minded in my approach. It was as close to an apology as Damon expected to get. The ship's warning system suddenly blared. Pursuit craft detected, Variel announced, banking the scout ship sharply. 3 interceptors closing fast. Weapons? Damon asked urgently. Minimal. This is a scout ship, not a fighter. Then we'll have to outrun them. Can we make it to the mountains? Variel's expression was grim. We can try. Hold on. Variel yanked the controls hard, sending their scout ship into a steep dive. The pursuing interceptors adjusted course, energy weapons lancing through the space they had just vacated. Damon gripped his seat as G-forces pressed him back. They're herding us away from the mountains, he observed, studying the tactical display, trying to force us toward open terrain where they can surround us. The azure canyons are ahead, Variel replied, her eyes never leaving the controls. If we can reach them? The what now? A maze of narrow stone formations. Dangerous to navigate, but the scout ship is more maneuverable than their interceptors. Damon nodded. Classic guerrilla tactic. Use the environment against a superior force. The ship rocked as a glancing shot hit their port stabilizer. Warning lights flashed across the console. Port stabilizer damaged, Variel reported tersely. Compensating. The canyons loomed ahead, a vast network of towering blue stone, formations split by narrow passages barely wide enough for their ship. Variel guided them into the labyrinth at breakneck speed, the vessel tilting almost 90 degrees to slip between 2 massive pillars of stone. Behind them, one interceptor attempted to follow and immediately scraped its wing against the canyon wall, sending it spinning into a stone column in a spectacular explosion. One down. Damon said with grim satisfaction. Don't celebrate yet, Variel warned as she executed another hairpin turn. The other two are still in pursuit and they're calling for reinforcements. Damon studied the canyon system on the navigation display. There, he pointed to a particularly dense section. That formation looks like a bottleneck. If we can get through and cause a rock slide behind us, the scout ship's energy cannons aren't powerful enough to cause a significant collapse. Variel objected. We don't need the cannons, Damon unbuckled his harness. Get us to that bottleneck, I'll handle the rest. What are you planning? Something stupid and human, he replied with a wolfish grin. My specialty,